The boat is designed to kill her, and it is falling apart on schedule. Agrippina the Younger, mother of the Emperor Nero, is somewhere in the Bay of Naples, and the vessel beneath her feet has just collapsed exactly as engineered. A lead-weighted canopy crashing down over the deck, the hull splitting along seams cut for this purpose. A friend standing near her is crushed instantly. Agrippina is not. She goes into the water, and she does the one thing her son's engineers did not plan for. She swims. Cassius Dio and Tacitus both record what happens next. A woman in her 40s, in the dark, in the sea, swimming toward shore, while the men who built her death trap watch it fail. She survives the night. She survives the swim. She does not survive what comes after. Because when the collapsing boat doesn't work, her son sends soldiers instead. And this time there is no water to swim to. The question worth asking is not how she died. It's why her own son needed a boat, then a knife, and a historical record scrubbed clean afterward, to be rid of her. To understand why Agrippina the Younger had to die, you need to understand what she had already survived, and what she'd built. She was born in 15 AD, into the Julio-Claudian family, at its most lethal, the great-granddaughter of Augustus, sister to the Emperor Caligula, and eventually wife to her own uncle, the Emperor Claudius. By the time her son Nero came to power in 54 AD, Agrippina had outlasted exile, the murder of 2 husbands worth of political rivals, and a brother who allegedly slept with her before he was overthrown and killed. She was not a passive dynastic ornament. She was, by the testimony of hostile male historians who despised what she represented, the most politically capable member of her family. This matters because Rome in the mid-1st century AD had no formal mechanism for female power. The Senate, the magistracies, the legions, all closed to women by law and custom. Agrippina exercised power anyway, through marriage, through motherhood, through sheer proximity to the throne, and by the 50s AD she had maneuvered her son onto it. Coins were minted showing her face beside the emperors, an honor with no real precedent for a living empress. She sat in on Senate business. Foreign envoys addressed her directly. That is the position she held when this story worth burying begins. A woman with more real authority than the Roman constitutional system was designed to permit, attached to a son who was young, unstable, and increasingly unwilling to share the throne he believed was his, and his alone. Rome's historians, Tacitus writing 2 generations later, Suetonius a generation after that, Cassius Dio further still, inherited an official version of what happened to her. All 3, to varying degrees, saw through it. This video is built on where their accounts agree, where they diverge, and what that divergence tells you about who controlled the story after she was gone. Nero became emperor in October of 54 AD, at 17 years old, and for the first months of his reign, the propaganda was blunt about who was really governing. Coins showed mother and son facing each other, equals in profile. Agrippina had spent years arranging this outcome, securing Nero's adoption by Claudius over Claudius's own biological son Britannicus, and, according to Tacitus, very possibly accelerating Claudius's death with a dish of poisoned mushrooms once the succession was locked in. Tacitus reports this as likely. Suetonius reports it as fact. Neither claims to have witnessed it. Poison was the accusation Romans reached for whenever a powerful person died conveniently, and you should hold that in mind for everything that follows. What is better attested is what happened next. Britannicus, Claudius's actual son and Nero's rival claimant, died suddenly at a dinner in early 55 AD, reportedly after collapsing moments after drinking from a cup. Tacitus places the poisoning squarely on Nero's orders, carried out by a specialist poisoner named Locusta, and notes that Agrippina's reaction, visible fear rather than satisfaction, suggested she understood immediately what her son had just demonstrated. He was capable of removing inconvenient family members without her permission, and increasingly without her knowledge. This is the hinge of the story. For roughly a year, Agrippina had functioned as co-ruler in fact, if not in title. Now her son was killing people she hadn't authorized him to kill, and doing it to send her a message. The relationship curdled fast. Agrippina, according to Tacitus, responded by aligning herself with Britannicus's sister Octavia, Nero's own wife, and reportedly floated support for a different candidate to the throne entirely, apparently prepared to unmake the emperor she had built if he would not be controlled. Whether this plotting was real, exaggerated by Nero's court to justify what came next, or a mix of both, is precisely the kind of uncertainty this channel won't paper over. Tacitus himself signals discomfort with his sources here. What isn't in dispute is that Nero moved to strip his mother of power methodically before he moved to kill her. He removed her bodyguard. He evicted her from the palace. He orbited her with informants. By 59 AD, according to both Tacitus and Suetonius, Nero had settled on murder, and settled on a method meant to look like an accident, a collapsible boat, built specifically for the purpose, to be used during a family reconciliation dinner at Bassaie on the Bay of Naples. The plan required Agrippina to trust the invitation, and she did, arriving by one boat, dining with her son in what Tacitus describes as pointed, unusual warmth, and departing afterward on the vessel that had been engineered to fail. It failed on schedule, in the dark water off the coast. Her friend Asaronia, Dio and Tacitus both report, made the fatal mistake of shouting that she was Agrippina, hoping for rescue, and was clubbed to death by the boat's crew for it. Agrippina, saying nothing, swam. She reached shore, understood exactly what had happened, and did something that has struck historians for 2,000 years, as either remarkably composed or remarkably naive. She sent her son a message, pretending she believed it was an accident, and that she was recovering well. It bought her almost nothing. Nero, informed his mother had survived, and now knew the truth, panicked, according to Tacitus's account, and dispatched a naval officer with soldiers directly to her villa. They found her in her bedroom. Tacitus records, and this detail appears nowhere else in Roman literature about anyone's death, which is itself worth noting, that when the first blow landed, Agrippina exposed her stomach to the sword and told them to strike the womb that had produced Nero. Whether this is a literal transcript, an invention meant to crystallize the story's central irony, or something in between, no source can say. What's certain is that she died there, in 59 AD, by her son's order, after surviving nearly everything else Rome had thrown at her for 4 decades. The killing itself was not hidden. What Nero's regime worked to control was the meaning of it. The first move was public justification. Nero sent the Senate a letter, reportedly drafted with help from his tutor, the philosopher Seneca, claiming Agrippina had been plotting his assassination and had taken her own life when the plot was discovered. Tacitus is explicit that this was understood as fiction even by the senators who voted Thanksgiving ceremonies in response. The official record and the believed reality diverged from day one, and the Senate collaborated in the divergence because contradicting the emperor about his mother's murder was not survivable career advice. The second move was slower and more thorough, reshaping how Agrippina herself would be remembered. Her own memoirs, she wrote them, and Tacitus explicitly cites them as a source for earlier events in his history, do not survive. They existed into the historian's own era and vanished afterward. One of Rome's more consequential lost texts, a first-hand political account of the Julio-Claudian dynasty, from the one-woman position to know its internal workings, gone. What survives instead is almost entirely the testimony of men writing under, or shortly after, regimes with reasons to portray Agrippina as the aggressor in her own murder. Ambitious, incestuous, poisoning her way to power, a monster whose death was regrettable in method, but understandable in motive. That framing served everyone who came after Nero. It let Nero's justification stand uncontested in the broad strokes even as historians privately doubted it. It fit neatly into Rome's deep cultural anxiety about women wielding power outside sanctioned channels, an anxiety Tacitus and Suetonius both wrote for audiences that shared. And it meant the most powerful woman of her generation entered the historical record primarily as a cautionary tale about female ambition, rather than as the political operator whose own account of events might have complicated the story considerably. Here is what the evidence supports without much argument. Nero ordered his mother's death, tried a mechanically clever method first, and resorted to a sword when that failed. Here is what remains genuinely contested. How much of Agrippina's alleged plotting was real? How much of the mushroom poisoning and Britannicus narrative reflects fact, versus the reflexive Roman habit of blaming sudden deaths on poison? And how she would have told this story herself, in the memoir Rome didn't preserve. What's not contested is the shape of the outcome. A woman who outmaneuvered nearly every rival in the most dangerous family in the ancient world was killed by the one person she couldn't outmaneuver, and then written into history primarily through the words of men who needed her death to look justified. Power that isn't allowed to keep its own records rarely survives being remembered fairly, and that has never been a uniquely Roman problem.